you. What are those who are not participating going to be doing during this activity? Excellent. Perfect. Thumbs up. Great job. Okay. Those of you who we're going to start now. Those of you who have a black bag on their table and are participating in the game, reach in and without peeking, take 5 chips out of the bag. Go ahead. 5 chips. Excellent. Perfect. No peeking. Thumbs up. Great job. Okay, those of you who we're going to start now. Those of you who have a black bag on their table and are participating in the game, reach in and without peeking, take 5 chips out of the bag. Go ahead, 5 chips. Once everybody at your table has 5 chips, great job. When you have your 5 chips, hold your hand up like this. We're going to start now. Those of you who have a black bag on your table and are participating in the game, reach in and without peeking, once you have your chips, hold your hand up like this out of the bag. So I'll know. Go ahead, 5 chips.
I know, right? What's that really kind of like that?
Okay, I'm going to give you about a minute more. You guys can put your hands down. You must be getting tired. There. Let the rest of the folks hold your hand up like this in the game. They need to be. Okay, the next thing I want you to do, once everyone has their chips, I want you to seal up that bag tight. No more going in that bag. Seal it up tight. Just, no, just pull the black cords. Pull the black cords. You don't have to shut the ziplock. Just the black cords. Okay. Now, here's the game. Using mental math, no paper, no pencil, no calculator, no phone, no assistance whatsoever. Just your brain, no friends. You add up your points. For example, if you have a yellow chip, anybody have a yellow chip? Raise your hand. Oh, good job, you got a yellow chip. Anybody have a black chip? Oh, fantastic, superior skill at pulling those chips out of the bag. Okay, so if you have, for example, a black chip, it's worth 25 points. You guys are superstars. You rock, man. Okay? You have 25 points for that black chip. Now, what you're going to do after you figure out which chips you have and the color and their point value, if you happen to have any combination, a pair, 3 of a kind, 4 of a kind, you get to add the values together and then you get a bonus. For example, if you have a yellow chip and you have a pair, 20 plus 20 is 40 plus your bonus of 5, so you would have 25, right? Does everybody understand that? Oh, you have 45, right. Everybody got that? Okay, for all the other colors, the ordinary colors here, you get the sum value, same thing, plus you get a bonus, but you only get 3 for a pair. For triplets, you get 5, and for quads, you get 7, okay? Start adding up. Now, I hope all you people that are observing and are participating, I hope you're all paying attention to this, okay? No paper, no pencil, just your brain.
So, the bonus point for each pair?
Yeah, you get bonus points for each pair. As many pairs as you have, you get a bonus point for those pairs, yes. Okay, if you're done, raise your hand. Okay, fabulous, fabulous. Okay, did anybody get 100 points? 90. You got 90? 95? Great, come on over here and stand by the wall. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous, head of the class. This is our A+ student, head of the class, setting the curve. Okay, anybody get 85? 80. Come on up here. You're right there, right next to her. Good job. What did you leave off on, 85? You're 85 or 80? 75. 70. Okay, 70s, go on up. Excuse me, ladies, but you're going to have to move. Just can you take your chips and find a spot over there that they left, and just go ahead and fill in. You can leave your stuff. I don't think they'll mess with it. Just take your chips. Yeah, make sure you take your chips. Thank you. You guys did such a fabulous job. You get to sit in the front. Have a seat. You know, it's amazing. I don't know how you figure that out, especially 95. That is absolutely, the probability of that is absolutely incredible. But I know it's based on your skill. So, you know, great job. All of you, fabulous job. The rest of y'all, you should pay attention to how they draw the chips out, because obviously they know what they're doing. Okay? I taught high school for 20 years. Can you tell? Okay. Round 2. Okay? Pay attention. And I'm going to give you a little handout so you all know what you're supposed to do for round 2. So this is basically for the observers because they don't get a piece of paper. Okay? Here, go ahead and spread some back. You can. Observer, yeah, there's observers around here. So round 2, we're going to play the game a little bit differently. So in round 2, really the purpose of this is to use your addition and multiplication of whole numbers, okay, to arrive at a minimum score. And I'll tell you what that minimum score is in a minute. For round 2, everybody open up the black bag and take out the plastic bag so you can see the chips. Everybody take them out. This is called transparency. I have just changed the representation of the task that you were doing. Keep that in your head. Okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to select everybody some additional coins, additional chips, 5, so that everyone that is playing the game has a minimum of 100 as their score. Okay? You may receive and offer assistance from other groups in the room. So let's say you don't have any of the high-value chips left in your bag because someone has them all. Then you can go ahead and you can ask other people to assist you from the other tables if they may have some of those chips left and you may need some. Okay? You may share chips from other tables. You may use paper, pencil, calculators, and phones to figure out what you need to get to 100. Okay? Same point value. Get to it.
Yeah. We're the ones that have talent.
But I think the correction is that we all have a minimum.
Everyone in the room who's playing has to reach 100 somehow. So if you need to borrow a chip or two from someone else at another table so everyone reaches 100.
At least 46. Are you how close are you to 100?
She needs.
That's all you need.
Remember your combinations. Use those combinations to get there.
But we have to have 10, right?
10 coin, 10 or yeah, minimum, using 10, minimum. Oh.
Oh, I need one more.
Okay.
I didn't play the game right.
Does anybody need more chips? Because this table has offered them up. I got a yellow here. Anybody need a yellow?
I'll take a yellow.
Okay, here you go.
Thanks.
Thank you, table.
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay, you're fine.
Red is 7.
10 chips, minimum 100. You guys taking good notes here? You taking good notes? Having fun here? Okay, I'm going to give you about 4 more minutes. If you need help, ask for help.
Oh, I know I have one.
I do. Sorry. That gives me 80, 94,
Purple's worth 5. You're,
Yeah, I need one more.
okay, hold on. Let me get your extra bag.
What's your low one?
Everybody here got it? Almost?
Yes.
Okay.
I just need 540 and then I'm done.
And 10 chips.
I have less. I can have less than 10 chips, or I have to have 10 chips. What's the rule?
Just throw another chip on there. You have to have 10 chips and minimum 100. Minimum. So if you have 105, it's fine.
4, 6.
Okay, so let me clarify. If you're over 100 with 10 chips, it's okay. Minimum is 100. No, you need to be, minimum is 100. Right. So if you need to get another chip and you're over 6 or 5, that's fine. Okay. If you have 10 chips only, though. Right. Okay. Where's your 10 chips?
Oh, I left them over there.
Well, go get your other chips. But you've only got 2 here.
Yeah, well, because I knew how many I had.
But you're supposed to have 10. You have to have 10.
We really do have to have
Even if
10.
you don't have, even if you have more than 100 points.
Oh, okay, then we need our bags back. Sorry.
Yeah, $1.21.
Okay. Are we all done? How many more need some more time? Okay, 1 more minute. Help your friends out. Okay. Okay, now that you're done,
For the red,
yeah, be careful. Those reds and oranges are tricky. Orange is worth 13. Uh-huh. That's 39 right there with those 3 plus your bonus. They're orange. The red's deeper. I know, it's, yeah. Okay. Are you, okay. Eyes up here. All right. I want you, those of you that just finished doing that, I now want you to discuss the following questions at your table. How did you feel after round 1? The questions are also on your little handout. How did you feel after round 1 of the game? How did I make you feel? You didn't get the little handouts? Oh, here, you guys can sort out what you need. Okay. And then the second question, hold on. The second question is, shh, quiet please. I know, shh, it's rude. What do you feel was the real purpose of the game and who plays the game? And let's set some parameters here when we're doing this because we're going to have a lot of discussion. Okay? I'll raise my hand and then when I say peace, you say quiet. Okay? Peace. Quiet. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead and discuss. Just don't forget those second questions. Do you have the handout? Because the handout's, it's on your handout.
We were all on an equal playing field. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it seemed like we started some
When I say peace, you say thank you. Observers, I have some questions for you. What did you observe during round 1 of the game? How do you think the high score people felt? How do you think the low score people felt? How do you feel about being excluded? What do you feel was the real purpose of the game? Why play the game? Okay, so everyone could continue on with their discussions for about 3 or 4 more minutes, and then we'll come back together again. And the observers do their discussion, and you folks, the players, do their discussion that are on the pieces of paper. Okay, go ahead, go.
Well, they probably felt good about themselves.
If you want to go with another observer, whoever was the observer here, you can move, or you can just stay where you are. Okay. Oh, you're the non-observer. You're the okay. Okay.
Wow, you came a long way. Even though you don't know the topic, we have to
get up. And maybe they didn't want to. Some people have to move. So maybe it was generated and based on something that you control. So I'm guessing it would be more.
Yeah, that's key. That's exactly. Then he really doesn't give a
Huh?
You still have 12:15 is the end.
I have it's a mean game, isn't it?
It's kind of funny. I'm always curious to see how
People
adults
react.
Yeah.
Okay, if we could finish up that last thought. When I say peace, you say?
Quiet.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back a little bit and let's talk about the participants. Now let's go with the observers, since they've been so patient with us. So observers, could some of you possibly share out what did you observe during round 1 of the game?
Okay, until the superiors got moved.
It was okay? Yes.
I also felt that when the directions were given, that once you started praising those over there, you used different words. So I felt that was kind of unfair because I felt kind of cheated. Because it's like, wait, you didn't give us that opportunity to look at them. We just chose randomly. But then you were saying, oh, you used some skill, and there's no skill involved at all.
Really? So it was random. So it's random that they're here and got a more privileged position, right? Right. Totally random. Mm-hmm. Although they may say, no, it was meritocracy. Right? How do you think the high score people felt? Well, let's ask them. How did you feel, high score people?
I felt really stupid because I was being recognized for something that I had absolutely nothing to do with.
Yeah. And I felt like, hey, I lucked out. All good.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but you also told this group that you were very rude about. You said you just kind of move over here.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you didn't have any, you were just direct. And so I said, sorry, please get up and move over here.
Right. I'm usually not this mean, just to let you know. Yeah, yeah. I'm usually not this mean. Remember, I said we're setting the stage. Folks that were excluded, how did it feel to be excluded?
I just stopped paying attention and started doing stuff on my computer while they were working. Didn't feel very good.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we include people in the classroom, but they're not really included. They're on the periphery. Right? Oh, they're mainstreamed. They're in the gen ed class. Okay. What do you feel was the real purpose of the game and why play the game? Anybody? Was the purpose of the game really to do mental math? No. What was it? Yes.
You experience the emotions of being included and excluded.
Being privileged and not being, yeah, go ahead.
Particularly in the context of anxiety. I'm pretty good at math, but I hate complex rules and caveats, and so my anxiety level was rising, and that accentuated the effect.
So whenever I do this activity, I have found that math is the best thing to use, especially when I tell you no paper, no pencil, it has to be in your head. It just sends people over the edge. Some people, it's just like, I can't do this. Yes?
I'm a math teacher, and you didn't give me the rules, and I even snapped at you, and I'm like, those were not the rules that you gave.
That's right.
So,
Exactly right. So learning should be transparent learning, right? Let me know what I'm supposed to do. Help me out here, right?
Well, and even watching everybody's like hesitation to stick their hand in the bag, and then when you remove that barrier, right, and you could see the plastic bag, everyone's like, oh, okay, and they kind of knew what was expected.
So the second round, what was the difference between the first round and the second round in terms of the activity? What did you have the second round that you didn't have the first round? Visual. The representation changed. What else?
You knew what you were doing.
You knew what you were doing, so you knew the rules. You were allowed to use supports. You were allowed to, right? You were allowed to vary how you came up with the numbers that you came up with, right? Even looking around at the tables, there were some tables where one or two people took the lead and say, what do you have? And they would divvy it out. There were other tables where they would just send the bag around and whatever anybody needed, at the end they'd exchange it so it all came out okay. Totally different approaches at a lot of the different tables. It was very interesting to go around and watch. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add about this activity?
I think personalities matter too, because when the 4 superior people got moved, when we first did it, it was all on a level playing field. But then when they got moved, at first I thought, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. And then I thought, well, I don't care.
So you kind of check out, didn't you?
Checked out.
Yeah. And that a lot of our kids
Right.
check out. Okay.
I
So-
felt farther away from you, and I wanted to be farther away from you. I thought, well, this is a teacher I'm never going to take again.
I was acting, you guys. I was acting. Okay. So go ahead and just throw the chips back in the bag. And I want to applaud you all. Thank you all for playing the game and being such good sports. And I hope you don't leave here today with bad feelings, because that's not really how I want you to leave. It's just to get us all thinking about culturally and linguistically relevant pedagogy and UDL. Okay? And throughout the rest of this presentation, I will be hearkening back to this experience. So it's something that, since we have this shared experience, when I talk about it, it's something that we can all hang what we're learning onto. Okay? Okay, you're back in your seats. All is right in the world. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so after the end of that activity, we just did a lot of reflection. You did it by yourself. You did it with the folks at your table. You did it. We all did it together. And I think that's something that, if I want you to come away with anything from the presentation today, reflection is one of the key concepts I really want you to take away. Because we really should be thoughtful and reflective of our practices. And when you're talking about culturally and linguistically relevant pedagogy, which from now on I will say is CLRP, because it's a mouthful, and universal design for learning, which from now on will be UDL, because it's a mouthful, reflection is key to getting it right. Okay? So it's key to understanding students and the classroom environments that promote what we want of our students, which is to be independent, to be resourceful, knowledgeable, goal-directed, purposeful, and motivated learners. Okay, it's key. How many of you, does this conjure up an image of anything for anybody? No? Okay, well, it's interesting because I was just at a conference last week, And there was one of the quotes they had up on the wall was, if a flower or plant isn't thriving, you don't change the plant, you change the environment. And if you think about our classrooms as the plant's environment, then that's what we need to change so that all of our flowers can thrive, right? And the reason I really like this is because there's this great, there's a great poem by Tupac Shakur, and it's called "The Rose in the Concrete." And he says, "Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's law is wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else ever cared." And I just think that is just so beautiful, because how many of our kids, you know, we talk about trauma-informed education right now, about its instruction, and really being thoughtful about the students who are in our classroom. So when you start thinking about all the things that some of our students come up against, and here they are, roses in the concrete, it's absolutely marvelous, okay? So journey. Education, as we all know, it's a journey. It's a journey for you as people in education. It's a journey for our students going through the educational process. It's a journey for our families and our communities, right? So I really want to talk about now for a little bit about the role of education in the identification of students of color, students who are English learners, students in poverty, how they're overrepresented in special education, okay? And I also want to talk about how it's addressed in the research. Because when you look at the vast amount of research that discusses students of color, students who are EL, students who live in poverty, it's all about the numbers. This percentage of Hispanic students or Latinos, this percentage of African American students, this percentage of students who are EL in special education, they're in African American, you know, males are represented more as ED or as being ID. EL students are represented more for specific learning disabilities, so on and so forth. It's all about the numbers. It's never about the individual students. And how did those students get identified? So that's kind of like where I'm at. I really want to drill down into that. And that started with some research. I went ahead and I looked through the current literature and I looked at the different kinds of pedagogy, and it minimizes the voice and perceptions of students with disabilities. And I looked at it as from two ways. I looked at it as students with disabilities and students with disabilities who are students of color in EL and students in poverty. And I generally found that there's a marginalization of students with disabilities in general education. We all know that, right? Okay. Special ed has been built as a subsystem of general education. Okay. The state of California is now trying to get that whole one system done, and it's finding it very hard to get special ed back into the concept of being part of general ed. Also, we know there's a disproportionality of students in special education. What has happened recently in the state of California is that there are new federal guidelines that were put out for disproportionality, and students of color, and now 90% of the districts are in disproportionality in the state. Scary. The study, I'm going to go through this very quickly. The study was with 8 students and 7 teachers, and it looked at 8 different classroom settings. There were classroom support differences. The students like to have direct, explicit instruction. They wanted to know the rules, right? Okay. They wanted instructional supports. Give me a calculator. They wanted individual supports. Could you just give me a little one-on-one and explain this to me? Okay. They liked working with their peer groups. Interesting, they said, as long as the teacher monitored the groups. Okay. They wanted curricular supports, scaffold, things like that, and physical supports. You know what? I need to take my test someplace quiet. I can't take it around everybody else. Okay? The teacher, what they offered were organizational tools, like you have a notebook for math or science or whatever. Study guides. There's a test coming up. These are the things you should know. Notes. They would give them the teacher notes. And they'd say, here's the calendar for the whole semester when your stuff is due. Big differences between the two, what the kids wanted, what the teachers offered, right? So basically what the study did is it It had the students take a survey on the kinds of supports that they like, and then I interviewed them. We talked about the supports that they liked when that they came up with when they did the questionnaire, and then I talked to them about how they felt they should be best supported, and then they selected a teacher they wanted to work with, and they worked with that teacher about together building supports in the classroom that the student said they felt would be effective for them to be successful. So they built a learning partnership. Okay? So the students' themes came up over and over again. They wanted those classroom supports. They felt it is my responsibility. These are all secondary students. It was their responsibility. It's my job to learn. However it is I can learn, it's my job to learn. Didn't blame the teacher. They said it's my job. Equity was a big piece. And equity was different for the male students and the female students. The female students wanted everyone in the classroom to treat them equitably, and the male students wanted the teachers to treat them equitably. It's a case study, though, right? It's only 8, so don't put that in granite. It's a case study. Their favorite classes were those that they found engaging and relevant. And the feeling of success and feeling a failure, rigorous and challenging general education classes. A C in a general ed class meant more than an A in a special ed class. Teachers' themes. They wanted the students to approach them in a certain way. Some teachers said they have to come and talk to me face to face. Others said if they want to start out with an email, it's okay. If they want to drop me a note, write me a note, it's okay. They also wanted the students to be advocates. They didn't want to guess what the student wanted. They wanted the student to come prepared to come and tell them what they needed. Okay? And built-in obstacles. I don't have time to do this. This is really hard. Okay? So those are some of the things that the teachers found. And I understand all of those because I taught at high school. So I know a lot of those, I can understand those. So some of the transformative findings of the study. The students felt themselves at the end of the study, I'm a holder of knowledge. I know how I can learn, how I learn, and I know how I can be supported in my gen ed classes. They had increased self-advocacy. If I can go and do this and sit down and have a discussion with the teacher. Self-efficacy. I know I can now take charge, and there are certain things that I can accomplish. Change agent in the classroom. I can make changes in my classroom. And they felt like they now had built a learning partnership with a significant person in their life, with that teacher. The teachers, they suddenly realized, wow, you know, these kids actually, when you talk to them, it makes sense what they're talking about and how I can support them. Change in instruction. And what was interesting, and I'll show you something in a minute, change in instruction, not just for the special ed students, but for other students as well. It generalized. And they felt also that they had built learning partnerships.
I know we've talked about the note card thing, about having them write a note card and say what they want, but that's, I don't know, it's almost the face-to-face conversation that's better. I don't know, maybe I should take the time, like, especially next year in Algebra 1 when I'm going to be team teaching, maybe that's something that we do, you know, for each student, not even just the special ed students, all the students, and say, what would help you? Let's talk about what you need.
I was like, oh my gosh, when that came out of that interview. Here's someone whose mindset just changed from, you know what, I just figured it out. It's not just these students that need this, it's all the students that need this. So this is someone who is changing the environment of the classroom so everyone can survive and thrive. Okay, so I'm just going to give you about a minute to reflect, and you have that little the Think, Pair, Share paper if you want to use it, on the results of the study. How do you think the findings might influence teachers' learning partnerships with students, and how might a school administrator use this information? Okay, you can turn and talk now. Go ahead.
I guess it didn't actually play. I said, yeah, what happened to the audio?
It's not working?
Yeah, it didn't actually sound like it went through the... The one thing to be aware of is that when you have folks answering from the group, that there is no microphone on them, and so that people at the remote sites can't hear what they're saying. So the best thing would be at least to kind of maybe repeat what they...
Well, that's the card thing. Oh yeah, I see what you're saying from now on out. Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah, so that way they're not able to hear.
All right. Okay.
If you can, do the best you can with...
Okay, sorry about that.
At least kind of repeating what they say.
See, I didn't know I was doing virtual. I initially said I don't want to do virtual for these reasons. That's okay. And peace, quiet. Thank you. Just finish that thought. Thanks. Okay, we're going to move on now, and I want you to keep all these little pieces that we put together. Think of it as we're building a structure. The first piece is the game, how it felt, what you observed, okay? How it was structured. The second piece is what I just went through about talking about learning partnerships between students and teachers. And now we're going to discuss the relationship between UDL and CLRP. I'm just going to give you some background information, this, and hopefully I can get this to work.
I was driving down the interstate the other day when I came up behind a truck, and I saw a large sign on the truck that said, "If you cannot see my mirrors, I cannot see you." And we all know that when we have a car in our blind spot, that's not a very good thing. In fact, it could be dangerous. But it made me think about our blind spots. It made me think about what our blind spots can do to us as well-intentioned people, and that sometimes, perhaps, we're not as inclusive as others as we think we are. So I'll talk a little bit about inclusion today and about the inclusion paradox, that it is true that we are all human beings and that we are all alike. We share a human experience. Paradoxically, however, we are all uniquely different. We all have different DNA, different fingerprints, different patterns in our eyes, and we all have different stories and different experiences and different frames of reference on the world. But I think the issue of inclusion is actually, in this bullet point, is we are like some people more than others, that we have a propensity for affinity bias. We have a preference to surround ourselves with people who are like us. However, it is nevertheless a part of the human experience and different frames of reference on the world. But I think the issue of inclusion is actually, in this bullet point, is we are like some people, that the path to inclusion others would be smooth, that we have a propensity for affinity bias. We have a preference, and yet I'd like to suggest to you today with people not only is it not flat and smooth, however, it actually filled with visible and a part of the human experience and different frames of reference on the world. We think we're being inclusive from being fully inclusive. It will not surprise you to know that our in-group is smaller than our out-group. But it may surprise you that in recent years, in the field of neuropsychology, has been able to demonstrate that the neural pathways that we use when we think about ourselves And the neural pathways we use when we think about members of our in-group are the same neural pathways, causing us to be much more empathetic and much more sympathetic to people in our in-group. We use different neural pathways for people in our out-group, causing us to be somewhat indifferent to their success or failure. I was in Dallas-Fort Worth Airport a few years ago, and it was pre-9/11, and I had an unconscious habit that I didn't realize I had until that particular evening. When I boarded the plane, I would always look to the left and look into the cockpit, and on this particular evening, there was a woman sitting behind the pilot's seat. Now, she smiled at me, and I smiled at her. And then I sat down, and my stomach began to churn. And then my inner voice started to run like a ticker tape that said, oh my goodness, perhaps I need to change my flight. Really, a woman flying this plane to Fort Lauderdale tonight? A 757, a woman pilot? Now, I'm a diversity consultant, and I am not meant to think like that. So I then began to examine, what is happening? Why am I thinking like that? And I realized that I had a blind spot, that for me, the image of a competent airline pilot looks like this. He's tall, he's male, he's white, he preferably has silver gray hair, and he looks like he's ex-military. Now, he could fly the plane. I wasn't sure that she could. I'd like to share with you some of the data from Cognizant, my unconscious bias assessment tool. This is aggregate data from quite a large number of people from different client systems. And what you're looking at is 70% of this group were men and 30% were women. And what you can see in these results is that the men said that men exhibit leadership qualities greater than women do, that men are more assertive than women, and that men are more serious about their careers than women. However, they also said that men and women were valued equally for their revenue generation skills and were equally likely to be allocated major projects. But let's look at what the women said, the 30% of the group that were women. It may surprise you to see that the women also said that men exhibit greater leadership skills. The women also said that men are slightly more serious about their careers than men, and the women also said that men are more assertive than women. They did, however, disagree with the men on the issue of being valued for their revenue-generating skills and being valued or likely to be allocated major projects and clients. Now, how can this be? Because consciously we believe that we are actually striving for equity, that we have a meritocracy in our organizations, and that we're being fair, and that we're conscious of the gender differences. And yet, not just the men, but the women were colluding in this process. So, implicit biases are very pervasive. In fact, of the 15 million people who have taken Harvard University's IAT test, 80% of that group cannot, of both men and women, cannot resist the tendency to associate men with careers and women with home. Now, I had a professor once who said there's no such thing as the innocent eye, and that we really are not always seeing as clearly as we think we are. The brain distorts the message. In fact, we actually do physically have a blind spot in the retina of each eye. And it wouldn't stretch the imagination to think that perhaps this giraffe is looking at himself and saying, oh my, I look a little bit small and fat today. Because the brain distorts the reflection. And if it's distorting the reflection of ourselves, what is it doing in terms of your reflection or patterns for other people? Deepak Chopra said that our ideal body weight is hiding inside of us, waiting to be discovered. Just like Michelangelo discovered the David in that piece of rock. But what I'd like to suggest to us today is that there's a better self hiding inside each of us. There's a better self who's capable of being more inclusive than we really are. because despite the fact that we're well-intentioned, we're not always as inclusive of other human beings, particularly if they're not like us. Now, David's face is carved in marble in perpetuity. However, as part of our human experience, we have many faces. I'd like to talk about a couple of them today. First of all, we have what I call our professional face. That's the face that...
Okay, I'm going to stop her there because we're getting low on time. She brings up a lot of good points, right? Have any of you ever taken those implicit tests online, implicit bias tests? Google it and take them. You can take them related to gender, to age, to ethnicity, to all kinds of things. And it's really fascinating to see the results at the end. It's kind of like, oh, I didn't know that. So I've taken a few of them, and I have some blind spots. And so now I always think about that when I am, working with people, because I have my own biases. And in a way, it was great that I took that, because now it made me very much aware of what those biases are. Okay, so think about the information in this video and the students in your classroom. What is your image of the perfect student? How might your blind spot affect instruction in your classroom? Okay, I just wanted to give you a minute to reflect there, and we're going to move on. Maybe. Okay, we're going to skip that one because I'm getting low on time. So let's talk about culture. Culture is how we view the world, okay? She had a very good perspective there when she was talking about gender differences. But part of her culture was that, oh, it should be a male pilot, he should be ex-military, he should be white, he should be tall, yada, yada, right? That's embedded somehow or another in her lens. Culture is our lens on the world. It's how we view things. We're going to have a speaker, I think she's tomorrow, Zaretta Hammond, and she's going to talk about the brain and culturally relevant pedagogy. And she describes culture as having 3 levels: surface culture, shallow culture, and deep culture. Surface culture is holidays, foods, Day of the Dead is coming up. That might be surface culture, right? Okay. Shallow culture are those things that are more like related to a belief system. Like, for example, most people would see me as being a Latina, as being Mexican American. My husband is also Mexican American. The big difference is that I'm 3rd generation, and he came from Mexico when he was 10 years old. Let me tell you, even though we're both Mexican American, huge worlds apart, okay? Totally worlds apart. And we had to come together in an understanding of what that culture is and how to become culturally competent dealing with each other's culture and figuring out how we would raise our children in consideration of those 2 differences. So that's when you start getting into talking about deep culture. Deep culture is dealing with your ethics, your spirituality, what you really on the inside, what you really believe in, your belief system, okay? So some of the research on CLRP. Morrison and Robbins, even though it's 2008, if you get a chance, look up this article. It's great. It gives you great definitions of cultural competence, and it gives you incredible ideas as to things that you can do in your classroom to make it and embracing and making yourself culturally competent and make your classroom so that it is welcoming. Some of the things that they talk about are reshaping the prescribed curriculum. What they mean by that is a lot of times in textbooks, and textbooks have gotten a lot better, but think back when I was in school, and even now, if you look at a lot of the pictures in the textbooks, there's not a lot of diversity necessarily in what you see. In some of the stories in the literature, in what you see. I have a great example. When my son was attending high school, my husband, because I was teaching, And I was doing my own thing for back to school night or open house, whatever, and my husband would go around to our kids' classrooms. He goes to his English 11 classroom, and the teacher's talking about how they're going to be doing American literature. He raises his hands and he asks, oh, are you going to do anything by Carlos Fuentes or Octavio Paz, because they're from Latin America, American literature, right? Because that's his perspective, because America is 2 continents. And she says, no, we're doing American literature and we're going to start off with Othello. And my husband's like, comes to me and says, do you know what that? And I'm like going, I have to work with this person. Don't do it. Okay, those are the kinds of things we're talking about where people really aren't right. Okay. So, and I'm going to, because I'm running out of time here, but I want you to just think back for a minute, and I'll give you a moment to share on this too. Think back when you were a student in elementary or high school. Was there a particular lesson you always remember? And why? You can discuss that among yourselves. And you all don't have to come up with one. If there's one of you where it just pops in your mind, just share it.
Everything was personally. And so it was nice because it gave us a choice. But you got to pick however you want. And you could do all those like 10 different small ones.
Write did well the way she wanted it. I didn't know that then, but I look back now and I realized being in this position, honestly, I reflect back on how that kind of shaped how I saw it.
Me.
That this class was in Virginia, and my teacher passed. So,
Okay, so let's finish that last sentence. I say peace, you say? Great. Okay. So one of the things it talks about is bridging the student's culture and background to the content and curriculum, and to encourage relationships between schools and communities. Okay? So for example, if I'm doing American literature, maybe I start thinking about, okay, what is America to the folks that are in my classroom, right? And that changes maybe what are the novels that we're going to read that year, right? Okay, that's an example. Or if you're in the elementary ed, some of the examples that Morrison gives is in using math manipulatives, they would use dominoes or they would use seashells that were reminiscent of where the students are coming from. They would use different manipulatives that might represent something that was meaningful to the students. Okay? And then encouraging relationships between schools and communities. For me, I think this is one of the hardest things there is to do, because it's so hard for so many of our parents to come in, because some of our parents work 2 jobs, work 3 jobs. And then some of our parents on top of that, a lot of our parents, have students with disabilities, right? So there's not a lot of, so arranging it somehow, whether it's childcare or something, whether they're making sure that there's always someone there that speaks the language of the parents, so that they feel welcome and they feel like, yeah, I really want that partnership with your school. Another important thing that he found with the teachers that were most effective using culturally and linguistically relevant pedagogy was that they had high academic expectations for the students. They had academic rigor, okay? But they used modeling. They would show the students how to do it first. scaffolding and clarification of the challenging curriculum. They would use metacognitive, they would show their metacognitive skills. Okay, for example, when you're playing the game, if I had an orange chip worth 13 and I had another chip worth 7, and then I had 2 other chips worth, 5 each, I might go, oh, the 7 and the 13, well, I know that's a 20. I'm going to stick those 20 together, and then I know that these 3, 5, that's 15. 20 plus 15, that's easier to add together than 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 7 plus 13, right? So showing that, those think aloud skills that we all talk about, showing how that works so that you are giving them a scaffold, a structure upon which they can build, okay? Or the other one is starting out with a simple task. Pulling 5 coins, count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out of the bag. Then making the task more difficult. Okay, now we're going to assign points to those. And you're going to add them up. Now, you're going to add them up to a higher amount, and I'm going to let you see what those coins are, and you can use your friends. So eventually, making sure that everybody gets 100, that's a difficult task. But since it's been scaffolded for you, where now you can see the coins, now you can use paper and pencil, now you can use your friends, now you can use coins from other, I've gotten you to a much more rigorous level, but we built steps along the way, okay? And then the other one is using students' strengths as instructional starting points. Strengths-based instruction, right? Okay. What can you do? And we're going to start from there, and then we're going to build on that. Okay? You write incredibly descriptive sentences. Okay, so there's issues with grammar and spelling, and that's what we're going to work on. But let's just start out with you writing really a paragraph, a really descriptive paragraph, and then we'll do the other stuff, right? Versus you need to learn how to use a verb and how to use an adverb, and you need to know how the sentence should be structured. I would run out of the room. I went to Catholic school and we diagram sentences. I would run out of the room if we started doing that, okay? I'm scarred for life with that one.
Well, it's not just the grade. I think I might have done better in my math class. I almost got an A, but I think I'm more happy about my English grade because I never really had problems with math, but I've always had problems with English. So doing good in English was pretty awesome. Yeah, and English is still definitely my most challenging of all my classes.
This was one of my students. And I actually had taught him previously, and he said, Miss V, I really don't want to hurt your feelings, but when you taught me in 9th grade English in that special ed class, yeah, well, I'm much happier with my C in my gen ed class than with the A you gave me in your class. And I said, no hard feelings at all. I'm proud that you got that C, and I'm glad that you're happier about that C in that gen ed class than that A you got with me in the special ed class. So yeah. This is what we're talking about. So when we talk about students and we talk about, oh, it's too rigorous for them, they can't handle it, so on and so forth, this is a kid who would rather have that rigor and be exposed to that rigor than get an A or a B. I'm so happy with the grade I got. Okay? So the other parts that Morrison and Robbins and Rose talk about is investing and taking personal responsibility for student success. The schools, we always hold up Sanger as one of those places that has done incredible things with its students and its schools and really turned the district around. One of the first things they talk about, and also when you start talking about professional learning communities, PLCs, one of the first things that everybody has to agree upon is that those students are our responsibility. Everybody takes responsibility for the student's success. And if we don't have that personal responsibility, then we don't feel like we need to change the environment so that our flowers grow. We feel like I've provided you an environment. If you grow, you grow. If you don't, you don't. It's your choice. Okay? So that's something that is key. Creating and nurturing cooperative environments. Okay. Did it feel a lot better? You can just say yes or no. When you all got to work together versus, you were all on your own and sink or swim, right? Okay. And high behavioral expectations, right? And they found that, that the teachers that had the most culturally competent classroom are the ones that really said, these are my behavioral expectations and these are the rules that you will follow. What I'm going to be handing out to you now is based upon the works of Ladson Billings. And this is from the National Equity Project. Keep some for yourselves and pass them on. Just start passing them that way. And I really like this because it's a tool for you all to use. And it's a culturally and linguistically responsive pedagogy. It's a self-assessment tool for your classroom. You can, okay, I'll pass it on. And as a teacher in developing your practice, you may not be able to focus on all of these areas, but over time you can develop a breadth of different kinds of strategies. So one of the first things that they talk about is affirming in a CLRP classroom. You strive to support a sense of belonging and comfort. You want everyone to be comfortable. You belong here in my classroom. Validating. Acknowledge the real world your students live in. When I used to teach high school, I knew that I had students that didn't have breakfast. So in my classroom every morning, I had fruit, I'd have, bread, I had a toast, things that you shouldn't have in your classroom probably, that the principal, if he had known, probably would have gotten a little upset. But a microwave. I always did that because I knew there were students that didn't have breakfast. They didn't have money. And I wanted to make sure they got something to eat. And I also knew that I had teenagers who would have Coke for breakfast instead of something nutritious too. Cognition. Recognizes that culture is a filter. That's that filter that we talked about before, about that bias and the culture and that filter we talked about. The airplane pilot, your blind spot, right? Okay? And students that come to us that have been, and you hear it more and more and more, that have been traumatized, it adds to that culture and that lens. And something that you feel may not be threatening at all may be essentially threatening to them. So for example, I might come in and lean in like that they may see that as a threat and may set someone off. So really think about those kinds of things. Also processing, utilizing talk and task routines. So for this group, the routine I set up was, when I say peace, you say quiet, right? So using things like that so that everybody knows they're not caught off guard about, oh, was I supposed to be quiet? I didn't hear the teacher. But if you know when I want the room quiet, I say peace, you say quiet, and we use that over and over again, then no one is caught off guard. Okay? UDL. So you got a big, long talk this morning about UDL, right? Yeah? I'm going to go through this quickly. So we learned about the different kinds of affective network, right? Did you learn about that? Okay. So when we talk about UDL, we talk about, there's three networks: the affective network, the recognition network, and the strategic network. Affective is the why. Why am I doing this? Are you engaged? Those lessons that you talked about that you remembered from when you were in elementary school, right? Or high school. Why do you remember them? Well, hopefully it was because you found them pleasurable and engaging and they were relevant to you, right? They made sense. The representation, the what of learning. As teachers, we need to change the presentation of information and how students get information so that they can process it better, so that they can take it in better. So for example, I had you take the clear bag out of the black bag, because it was another form of representation. You could now see what you had to work with. It was no longer a mystery. That was a change in representation, okay? Some of the information I give you is up here, and some of it I also give to you in paper form in front of you, because it's easier for some people to follow on the PowerPoint, and it's easier for others to follow it on their computer if they pull it up, and easier for others to follow on a piece of paper they can take notes on, right? Action and expression, which is the how. We want our students to be goal-directed strategic thinkers and learners. So in order to do that, we differentiate the choices that we give them. At this table here, I was listening to someone describe her favorite lesson because the teacher gave them options as to how they could earn their points. A whole bunch of little small ones, one big one, you had choices. For some students, it might make more sense, instead of writing a poem, if they can write a song, or if they can write a story, or if they can perform a song or a story. Options. It's all about options. So when we talk about universal design for learning, we want to vary the means of action and expression for our students. We want to vary the means of representation. We want to vary the means of engagement. And if we do all those things, we are providing more learning opportunities. So universal design for learning guidelines. How many of you have seen this already so far? Yeah? Okay, I'm going to give you your own copy. And on one side is this. And then on the other side is the educator worksheet. How many of you have seen the educator worksheet? Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pass these down again. Now, what's cool about this is that they're kind of like little rubrics or little hints that give you, go ahead, just go pass them down. Thank you. Thank you, those that are passing them down. Guidelines for how you can use multiple means of expression and action and expression and engagement. Very useful. Keep them handy when you're developing your lessons. And I always thought it was really interesting because for a lot of our students that have issues, when you look in the engagement piece for our students that may have problems working with others, yeah. Yeah, they should be coming. There's some coming. Is there anything, if there's nothing else you got, okay. So when engagement, we want to foster collaboration and community. We want to also facilitate personal coping of skills and strategies. We want to develop self-assessment and reflection, and we want to promote expectations and beliefs and opinions and motivations. That engagement one is where you should always begin with your instruction with students. If you want to start instituting UDL, start with engagement. Because if you're not engaged, just like she said, okay, once you started treating people badly, I'm gone, right? Okay? If I don't get to play at the back, they said, I'm disengaged, I don't care anymore, right? Okay. So start with engagement whenever you do UDL if you want to start using it. It's the easiest place to start. This is another one of my students.
My favorite class currently is my class I'm at CCOC, which is Computer Technology and Careers. It's my favorite class because it's what I like to do is with computers. In that class, I'm allowed to build high-end servers, build high-end gaming computers, do liquid cooling, use liquid nitrogen in the class to cool those computers, and it teaches me a lot of stuff that I don't have access to at home, just due to physical space. My teacher in the class, though, really doesn't support me in a lot of ways. I make my own curriculum in the class, not due to the fact that I'm behind. I'm actually the top in the class right now. And I teach actually my own little group in the class of 5 students, and we do advanced topics in the class, such as large-scale data storage and MySQL services. What the teacher does that makes me want to be in that class is he provides me a lot of the software that I need that costs a very large amount of money, such as an operating system that we just got in Windows Server 2012 Data Center Edition, which is about $5,600. And that is what makes me want to be in that class, is I have access to a lot of services that I would not have at home. My least favorite class is definitely geometry. I'm just not very good at it. It's very hard for me to visualize shapes and then cut them in half and then find out the X value of that shape. It's just hard for me to see the purpose in doing it. If it's physically in front of me, though, I can do it very fast.
That broke my heart. It broke my heart because then he proceeded to tell me that he would, after geometry, he would go home, he'd go on the internet for 3 hours and try to figure out what he was supposed to be doing. He eventually dropped out of geometry. Good ending, though. I asked what his long-term plans are, and he said, I want to go to college, probably go to community college first, and take what I need to get, and then I want to go to a 4-year, and I'll work while I'm going through community college, and I'll probably work in the computer industry, and that way I'll make a lot of money, and I can still keep on going to school. That's exactly what he did. So you sit there and you think, oh my gosh, here's this guy who's so good with it, in using computers and doing all this stuff like this, couldn't do the math. That was his disability. But if it was in front of him, okay. So if you're that geometry teacher, just think of what you could have done so that he understands why, for what he's doing, why he should know geometry, because he needs to figure out how things are going to fit inside the motherboard, the memory, the whole ball of wax, right? Think how you could have used that to change the life of this young man, right? So, anyway. Change the environment, don't change the plant, right? My other favorite expression is remove the obstacles, don't remove the student. Okay, remove the barriers, not the student. So when we talk about UDL, we talk about designing, and you probably heard this morning, at the margins, which optimizes learning for everyone. We talk about if we design for those at the margins, there are frequently side benefits created that were not initially planned. And if we design for those at the margin, we strengthen our learning alliances with our students. My favorite one is closed captioning. Now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to have a hard time hearing, I can read the closed caption and don't have to have the TV as loud. Or another example is because I'm not as culturally proficient as I should be, when I watch my favorite on PBS, the detective mysteries, I need the closed caption so I know what they're actually saying. Because sometimes I can't figure out what they just said. So it serves more than one purpose, right? Okay, so here's the crosswalk. When we look at UDL, we talk about multiple means of representation. We talk about multiple means of expression, and we talk about multiple means of engagement. When we talk about CLRP, we talk about cognition. That aligns with representation. We talk about process. That aligns with multiple means of action and expression. We talk about affirming and validating. That aligns with engagement. So remember this, right? For UDL. So this is UDL and CLRP. And this is how they fit together. UDL, we're going to vary the means of action and expression. This is in the Venn diagram, this is the processing. In cognition, in CLRP, is where we would find varying the means of representation. In varying the means of engagement in UDL, that's where we find validation and affirmation. It all fits together. Do not throw out one for the sake of the other. They all fit together. They both fit together. So this is my, my favorite story about how you can use UDL in a CLRP manner. And I have a great story for that, but we're running out of time. Well, just for 1 minute. We were talking about that whole Mexico thing with my husband and myself, and he's from there, he's not. Okay, well, if any of you don't know what this is a honey ant, and this is called a replete. And this is where they store things. There are certain ants in the colony that are basically storage tanks, and they hang from the ceiling usually like this, and then they store all this stuff, I guess, for when there's no food, and then they use the stuff that's in the replete. When I went to Mexico, my husband told me about how one of his favorite things to do was to go out into the countryside, dig up the ants, and eat what was in the replete. Ooh, that was my response. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm newly married. Okay, I'll be a good sport, right? So we go out, and, he's like, well, I go, well, how do you do it? He goes, well, you take the head and you just kind of, dust it off and just kind of stick it in your mouth, and you eat it. And I'm like going, oh, no, we're drawing the line here, bucko. Okay, put one in my hand, I puncture it. Okay, I tasted it, yay. Okay, but that's the whole idea. That was something that was perfectly fine to do. Not the way I was raised, okay? So that's an idea, that is my little story that goes with my little ant. So how do I use UDL in a CLRP manner? You want to be intentional. You want to start with engagement. You want to make it relevant. You want to provide for a safe learning environment, and you want to reflect on your practices. Those are the key things that you need to do. He intentionally, my husband, took me out to the middle of nowhere. Started with engagement. Okay, we're newly married. I'm pretty much into what, things that he finds interesting. Made it relevant. Well, this is something he grew up with, so I guess I want to know him, so it's kind of relevant for me. He made a safe learning environment. Here, you don't have to do it the way I do. You can do it the way that you want to do it, okay? And then later on, when I reflected on that practice, I found out it's not for me. Okay, so, so this is the next part. I would like you to do an activity that'll take a little bit of time. I just want you to become familiar with the tool. And so I'm going to have you do two things at once, okay? I'm going to have you discuss this, and while you're doing that, I'm going to pass out the tool, and then I'll tell you about the tool. So go ahead and start talking about that. Okay, pass back.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody gets one of these, so everyone gets one of both, so I'll pass these. Yeah, you can do that, either way, as long as they all get them. It's different. That's staple.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are you guys getting all the handouts back here? You are? Okay.
Where that is. Oh, okay.
Excuse me. Make sure you tell them they should have two handouts. The stapled and unstapled, so that they know. I know. Okay, when I say peace, thank you. You're going to be handing out two tools right now. One is stapled, one is not. One is for reading at the 5th grade level, and I believe the other one is for math at the secondary level. And does anyone recognize what these are? Yes, they're Common Core standards. Okay? What I have done is I have taken a Common Core standard and I have strategically placed some questions. Can I borrow this one for a second? I've strategically placed some questions below it where basically what I want you to do is I want you to read the standard and I want you to highlight or circle, if you don't have a highlighter, up the portion of the standard that uses terms that would deal with the recognition network. Okay, remember, the recognition network is the what. What does the standard want, right? I also want you to highlight the portion of the standard that's related to the strategic network. That's the how, the action, the expression. And then the last one is the affective, engagement. What is in that that could be engaging for the student, okay? So at your table, you guys pick if you want to do elementary or secondary, and I want you to do those things. Look at the standard and highlight those different parts that we talked about. All of those things may not be there. Highlight the parts that are there. Feel free to use your UDL guidelines if you need help. It really should be like a 2-hour presentation.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Did you guys find anything? The how, okay.
How are they going to demonstrate their knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
And what I think critical thinking. But why? Well, no, they can look critically, but it's hard to get them to understand why the importance is valuable unless I devote a whole block of time to that.
Okay. I say peace, you say? Okay. So I've been asked to repeat what people say, so if I repeat what you say, it's just because so the camera can pick up on it. So did anybody find anything in the what of learning? Raise your hand. In your standard. Okay, and what standard are you doing? Okay, in the algebraic thinking standard, what was the what?
Adding and subtracting within the hundreds to solve, and then adding and subtracting within 20.
Okay, so adding and subtracting within the 100s? Okay.
Yeah, there's 2 parts.
Okay, and then the other one was within the 20s. Okay, all right. So what about in the reading? Anybody? Reading informational text. Was there a what? What was the what?
How they relate to each other.
Okay, the what was how they relate to each other. Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
How an author's ideas or claims are developed.
Okay, so how the author's ideas are
Or claims are developed and refined.
or claims are developed or refined. Okay. Okay. What about the action? What is the action that was needed for these? The how. How are they going to demonstrate that they know it? Okay, so they're going to demonstrate it by analyzing in detail. Anything else? Okay, what about in the math? How are they going to show it? How are they going to, what expression is there?
Using drawings. Mental strategies and using drawings and equations.
Okay, mental strategies and using drawings and equations. Okay? So right there you have within the standard 2 examples of how from there using UDL you can now leap and you can think to yourself, how am I going to do this in the classroom? What are the different ways that I can show that they're analyzing, right? How they're going to do this? Or what are the different ways that they can model either through a graphic or whatever it is or through a model for the math, okay? So that's for you to determine. Other than having just one way, have a variety. And that way the students have choices on how they express how they have learned the material. That's the concept of UDL. There's just not one way. There's many ways to show that you have learned something, right? And there's also many ways to represent the information that you want them to learn. And there's many ways to engage. Like the young man with the computer. I can think of 10 different ways I could have gotten him engaged in geometry using his love of computers, right? Okay? So that's really what UDL is about, allowing people the choices and the opportunities and varying things so that everyone can be successful, changing that environment. The last piece of this, and we're not going to get to it because we are literally out of time, is where we do the lesson planning strategies. And that second piece to that, if you notice, I start asking you CLRP questions on the bottom. How can you show that you are affirming students? Look around the room. I know there's stuff cluttered on top of them. Do you see the pieces of fabric on the table? Each one of those represents a different country. The scarves were all, and fabrics were all made in a different country. That would be welcoming to someone who might say, oh my gosh, I recognize that. I'm from Thailand, and that material's from Thailand. Okay, I recognize that. That's a prayer scarf. That's from Japan, right? So that's the idea. Those are the kinds of things that you want to bring. Even those little things at the beginning, if those are incorporated into your classroom, what your classroom looks like, or the materials that you'll be using, those are the kinds of things, those little things that might make a difference. And I'm going to leave you with one little piece. When I would go traveling with my husband to the little place, he lived in a small town, and I would see all these other little small towns along the way. I would collect the names of the towns, and I would remember them. And then I would go back to school, and it just so happened that a large population of the students that I taught and went to the school that I taught at were from a lot of the little towns in the states, Michoacan, Guanajuato, Querétaro, these little towns. So when I would talk to them, I would ask them, where are they from? And they would tell me, they go, oh, I think I know where that is. I was driving, and I passed by this town, and it goes, oh my gosh, that's my town. The link between that student and myself from then on was absolutely incredible. He knew that I understood where he was from. So I'm going to leave you with that because it's just sometimes those little things that make all the difference in the world. Remember, change the environment, don't change the plant. Remove the barriers, don't remove the students. And I'm sorry we didn't go more in depth into the tool, but give it a chance and use it. And I think it'll make a difference in how you approach your instruction. Thank you very much.